So Doinby, how exactly do you get so much farm?
张牙舞爪健身操，祝您健康，步步高。
Let me guess, you want to be able to CS just like this. In fact, you've wanted to for a while, but before you clicked on this video, the process of trying to learn how to probably looks something like this. Man, I wish I could get good farm in League of Legends. I know, I should watch a video about it so I can learn how to. How to CS in League of Legends. 4 tips to improve CS and farm. Alright, this video looks pretty good. And it's by Pro Guides. Man, they sure do make great content. I'm going to learn so much from this. I better take some notes.
I'll be going over how to improve your farming so that you can flame horizon your opponents. Tip number 1, learn how to farm optimally under tower. Tip number 2, learn to freeze your lane. Tip number 3, practice, practice, practice. On to tip number 4. This is our final tip, and it's to take CS in the areas given to you.
Wow, I learned so much. Practically all of these videos that are made by the various different educational companies do the exact same thing. They ramble on for about 10 minutes giving random tips without context, and it tricks you into thinking you've learned something by the end of it when really you're none the wiser. And you know, I was sick of seeing all these videos, so I decided to make my own. I'm going to teach you what it actually takes to consistently get high CS by covering everything you need to know about farming in the early, mid, and late game. So, it's time to get into the first ever good League of Legends farming guide. This video will be split into 2 different parts. How to get 10 CS per minute during laning phase, and how to do it post laning phase. The main difference between this video and all the other bland corporate ones that you see is that I'll be talking about the skills that you need to get high CS and how you develop those skills instead of just...
Tip number 1, learn how to farm. Alright, that was it for our video.
But first you might be wondering, Bonks, what right do you have to teach me how to CS considering I just checked your OPGG and you literally average 5.4 CS per minute? Well, firstly, shut the fuck up. I went 1-9 in my placements. This season's really not the one for me, okay? Like, leave me alone. And secondly, it's not actually always a good thing to get high CS, despite what a lot of people seem to think. Especially when you're playing certain champs that need to meet certain conditions to win, but I'll be getting into that much more later, so don't worry about it for now. Just know that despite my profile, I actually kind of do know what I'm talking about when it comes to CSing. So, without further ado, let's get right into the first half of this video. How to get 10 CS per minute during laning phase. At the very surface level, getting high CS during laning phase requires that you do 2 things. 1, hit all your last hits while in lane, and 2, don't be out of lane while enemy minions are dying. So basically, we want to optimize these 2 things. Before I explain how to optimize hitting your last hits in lane, be aware this is an extremely high level concept and the explanation can get very complex. So I need you to listen carefully, okay? Okay, so what you need to do is, right when you see that a minion is about to die, you right click it. Fuck. But in all seriousness, as long as you're in lane and not under pressure, you should never be missing CS. It's literally just a matter of timing one button, so if you find this to be a weakness of yours, just hop into practice tool once a day and practice last hitting with no items for 10 minutes. Eventually you'll get better at it. That's just the easy part though. The actual hard part about CSing in laning phase is not losing minions while you're out of lane. So let's deep dive into this and work out how we can optimize it. Let's start with the very basics, just so no one watching gets left behind. In order to lose as little minions as possible when you leave your lane, either to recall or to roam, you need to set up the minion wave in a certain way. If the wave is pushing away from you, then your minions end up killing the enemy minions, so you miss a bunch, which we obviously don't want. Instead, the goal is to get the wave to push into us, so we can leave lane without missing any minions. Then of course we need to get back to lane before the wave crashes under our tower, or we're going to start missing minions again. There are 2 ways we can get the wave pushing into us. One of those ways is by crashing a wave into the enemy tower. The bigger it is, the more time we'll have, and the other way is by the enemy just pushing it for us. But obviously they're not going to do this when you want them to, so it's best to just rely on the first method. So basically, when we want to leave lane, we need to crash the wave first. Well, unless of course you're playing fucking Galio, in which case you can roam so quick it doesn't even matter. Fuck Galio. Or if you have TP, I suppose. Anyway, simple idea so far, but now here's the hard part. There are 2 problems we have to deal with. The first problem is that the enemy isn't going to let you do what you want with the wave. And the second problem is that even if they do, it's hard to know when you actually need to crash the wave. To deal with the first issue, you need to be able to gain lane control. This is the most important skill you'll need when it comes to getting 10 CS per minute in lane. So listen carefully. Firstly, let's define lane control. To put it simply, having lane control means you can do what you want without any consequences. You can walk up and try to trade, shove your wave, start a slow push, file your taxes, apply for a mortgage, jerk off, freeze the wave, or anything else you can think of. To have lane control, you need to have more threat over your opponent than they have over you. Okay, so how do you generate threat? Well, there are a few ways. The first way to generate threat is slightly out of your control if you follow my advice of only playing 1 or 2 champs, but it's by being straight up stronger than your opponent due to having a counter matchup. If you have a counter matchup, you have more threat over your opponent by default. That's just how it is. However, it doesn't mean that you'll have more threat for the entire laning phase. Even in a losing matchup, you can still take back lane control by generating more threat through another method. One such method is by being higher HP than your opponent. If you're higher health, then even if they have a counter matchup, you can still just do whatever the fuck you want so long as you can win the all-in. And obviously, if you want to be higher HP than them, you can just trade better than them. You can do that by timing your aggression like I've talked about before, by using superior knowledge of the matchup to take trades in favorable situations, or by out-microing them so hard that you dodge all their abilities, or just space them into oblivion and end up winning all your trades. This is why people say that counter matchups don't really matter that much in lower MMRs, because at the end of the day, both players make so many trading mistakes that whoever punishes those mistakes more ends up with more HP. Therefore, they also end up generating more threat and they get more lane control. So yeah, if you want to learn how to do that, you can go and watch this video I made on it. It's not like urgent, but it will be in the end card, so you can click on it if you want. And lastly, you can generate threat through your teammates. If your jungler is nearby, for example, you can ping them to hover you so you can get lane control for a bit. Same goes for your support if you're not playing ADC. And similarly, you can also hover your teammates to help give them more lane control when they need it. Any role can do this, so be sure to work on your ability to spot the chances for it. So, quick recap of what I said so far. To get high CS in lane, don't miss any minions while out of lane. To do that, you need to set up your wave properly, and to do that, you first need to get lane control by using any of the methods I just explained. So the first important skill you need is the ability to gain lane control, which I explained how to do just now. The second skill you need is the ability to use that lane control to crash waves at the right times. The right time obviously means whenever you plan to leave lane, so the idea is that you need to know when you want to do this way in advance. If you're planning to recall, generally this is quite simple. You just need to think about when you want to base a few waves before you actually do, then set up a slow push, crash it, and base. Sounds pretty easy, but most people don't even consider the fact that they need to base until right at the last second when they're out of mana or they have enough gold for their item. So try not to do that and you should be good. If you're planning to roam, it's a little harder. You need to be aware of the roam way in advance to it happening, so you need to have a really good ability to read the map. In some cases, this is really simple, like if dragon's spawning, you can just expect to roam once it spawns. Or in other cases, it can be quite hard, like if you're playing mid for example, and you want to counter gank the enemy jungler when they gank bot. In that case, you need to see really far ahead, and yeah, it's just quite hard to do. There are an infinite number of situations where you might need to leave lane to roam, so I can't go over them all, but the idea is that you should try to think about when you want to recall or roam way in advance so you can set up your wave accordingly. That kind of foresight is the second skill you need to hit high CS. So if you ever come out of a laning phase and you aren't even close to 10 CS per minute, go and review your game and think about which skills pertain to the CS you missed. Did you miss a bunch of CS while you were in lane? In that case, just right click the minions better. I don't know what to tell you, bro. Did you miss a bunch of CS while you were out of lane though? If you did, then was it because you didn't have lane control or because you mistimed your wave crashes? If it was for the lack of wave control, how could you have gained lane control? If it was because you mistimed your wave crashes, how could you have seen the roam or recall happening way in advance so you could plan it out properly? If you ask yourself these questions after every game and dive really deeply into the details when answering them, eventually you'll become a CSing demon in lane. Before we start talking about maintaining high CS post-laning phase, I want to talk about sacrificing CS, because it's not always a good thing to get 10 CS per minute. There are many situations, in fact, where it's perfectly fine to sacrifice a bunch of CS to make a better decision. So for example, a situation might arise where moving to a skirmish instead of taking an extra wave is worth it, or giving up a last hit to poke the enemy so you can improve your lane control might be worth it because it will help you get more CS in the long run. But there are other times where it's better to just take the wave or to just get the last hit. Just like earlier, there are millions of different situations and I can't cover them all. In fact, the only real meaningful advice I can give is think about what you're gaining from giving up any potential CS for making a certain decision, and ask yourself if that decision is worth the CS you're losing. Consider factors such as the kind of champ you're playing, like for example, a scaling champ might want to prioritize CS over a potential fight, whereas a snowbally champ might not care as much after hitting its spike, who the win conditions are on your team, and the state of the game, or in other words, who's winning or losing and what do you need to do to win. If you evaluate these factors against each other every time you decide to sacrifice CS, then over time your decisions will become more and more accurate without you having to do anything. And by the way, the reason my CS is low is because I play Zoe, who's a very snowbally champ, right? So I choose to give up CS in favor of skirmishes and trades a lot more than I would on Orianna, for example. I'm definitely not just bad, and I definitely didn't make this video just to justify my terrible OPGG stats. So, second half of the video. farming post-laning phase. God damn, this is turning out to be a long video. It's like over 10 minutes. That's like really long, no? I feel like a 1 minute or 30-second video is more ideal, to be honest. I don't know, if there are any hot women watching that could confirm if they also agree that a shorter time frame is more ideal, let me know in the comments. So in post-laning phase, there were 2 skills you needed to be proficient in to hit 10 CS per minute, but post-laning phase, there's 4. And the first, easiest to get down and most important is the ability to understand lane assignments. Usually lane assignments change after the first tower breaks, so that's when I consider the game to switch from laning phase to post laning. So here's how lanes are usually assigned. Note I say usually because in certain contexts it can be different, but if you just follow this advice generally, for solo queue you should be fine. If there are any caveats to this, you'll probably figure them out for yourself when the time comes. ADC and support move to the lane closest to the next objective, champs without TP move to the next closest lane, then champs with TP move to the furthest lane. So for example, say one tower has fallen and dragon is the next objective, bot lane will move mid lane since it's closest, the laner with ignite will move to bot lane, and the laner with TP will move top. Or if the next objective is top lane tier 1, the bot laners will move top, the laner without TP will be mid, and the laner with TP will be bot. Pretty simple. The idea is that you want your bot lane to be closest to the action because they have 2 people, and you use TP as a tool to pick up the CS on the other side of the map. So this raises the question, what if we don't have a TP on the team? Well, in that case, the person laning on the other side of the map needs to decide whether it's worth it or not to sacrifice the CS in order to join your team for the skirmish that will likely happen. I made a video talking about these kinds of decisions before, so I'm not going to spend 5 minutes explaining it now. You can go and watch it if you're intrigued. So, now that you're in the correct lane, what are the other 3 skills you need? Well, similarly to during laning phase, you need to be able to get the wave in the right spot at the right time so you don't miss minions while you're out of that assigned lane. It's pretty much no different than it was during laning phase, but now the concept of lane control is slightly different because now you have to think about towers. You can still consider the same 3 factors as before, but now on top of that, you need to consider the potential danger you're in if you don't have a tier 1 turret that you can retreat to in case of a gank. So what I'm saying is, if you don't have a tier 1 turret and you have no vision protecting you, and you have no info of where the enemy team is, you do not have any lane control. You literally just have to accept it and play like a bitch until you get vision on the enemy. When this happens, you won't be able to set up your lane correctly when you plan to leave, so you'll end up either missing minions or missing the skirmish you want to move to. However, that's only if the enemy is good. They won't be. So what you can do is simply try and freeze. When they mindlessly shove it into you, just hold it in front of your tower, freeze it, and when you think you're going to need to move soon, transition it into a slow push. Eventually you can shove it and move without missing too much CS. Similarly, if the situation is reversed and the enemy is missing a tower, try to stop them from freezing and build a slow push when you think you'll need to move. Knowing when you'll need to move is no different than it was during laning phase. So, quick recap. Post laning phase, to get 10 CS per minute, you need to be able to lane assign correctly, get lane control in your assigned lane while considering towers, and set up the wave at the ideal time so when you leave said lane, you don't lose anything. That's 3 out of 4 skills so far, so what's the last skill? I'll tell you what it is. It's the skill that separates the boys getting 9 CS per minute from the men that get 10. The chads, the alpha males, the goats of League of Legends. And that skill is not wasting any time. That's literally it. Just stop running around aimlessly when you don't know what your next move is going to be. Stop sitting with your team and hitting the tower that they're going to take down by themselves anyway. Stop helping your team push the wave that they're already pushing, etc, etc. It's actually crazy, and trust me on this because I do it too. It's actually crazy what you'll see if you go into one of your replays and just pay attention to how much time you spend doing nothing productive. You'll notice it's a ridiculously huge amount of time. Hey, kinda like in real life, nice. To give you a decent idea of how much time it is, I watched one of my gold friends play and recorded the amount of time they wasted doing pointless shit that achieved nothing, and in a 26-minute game, it amounted to 6 minutes. If that time was instead spent doing something productive, like recalling sooner than they did or moving to their next destination sooner so they can pick up some more CS, their CS per minute would have been about 15% higher. Imagine they could increase their CS by that much just by doing things more efficiently, and you can too. The best way to become more efficient in your gameplay is after every minor or major event that happens in game, immediately ask, what should I do next? After you push a wave, what should I do next? After a fight ends, what should I do next? After a quick trade in the jungle, or literally anything that involves pressing some buttons, do the first thing that you think of after asking that question, rather than just relying on what your brain comes up with on autopilot, and you will become so much more efficient and pick up so much more CS because of it. Final recap. During laning phase, to get 10 CS per minute, you need to be proficient in last hitting, getting lane control, and timing your wave crashes. To get 10 CS per minute post laning phase, you need to be proficient in lane assignments, controlling the lane you're assigned, timing your pushes in that lane, and being efficient with your time. I've explained how to get good at all those things throughout the video, so hopefully you can take something positive out of this, start applying it to yourself, and see some really nice improvement over the next maybe 6 to 12 months? I'm not sure, but it takes a while to learn this stuff, so bear that in mind. All I can really do now is wish you good luck. So until next time, in a bit.